In 2016, California wife and mother Sherry Papini disappeared for 22 days. When she was found, she told authorities a detailed account of being kidnapped and tortured. Years later, in a stunning twist, Papini pled guilty to making false statements about what happened to her, setting off a media firestorm. Now, for the first time, Sherry Papini is telling her side of the story and revealing shocking new information. Sherry Papini, Caught in a Lie, an ID documentary event, Monday, May 26th at 9 on ID. Set your DVR. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 197 of the True Crime All the Time podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
I'm good, man. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm worried about what's going on in this country right now, man. There's, we just talked about it on our weekly Patreon video. We've got wildfires in California.
Yeah.
We've got tropical storms, battering the Northeast and somehow extending in all the way into the Midwest.
Yeah.
And then obviously earthquakes. And then we're still dealing with the corona thing. So I think what I said on the video was, can we just get a break? We need a break.
Right.
Let us catch a break.
Or the guy that owns Virgin Airlines and Virgin Phones and Records or whatever his name, Branson, whatever, the rich guy, needs to
Richard Branson
rent us free his island.
And we all go there?
Well, not all of us.
I was going to say.
Be selective now.
Yeah, there's like 330 million people in this country, right?
Yeah. We can
and you and the TCAT fans could take up the whole island?
Again, we have to be a little bit more selective. How big is the
island? Because we have a lot of fans now, so I don't know how big the island is.
Well, when they get there, they'll have to do the temperature scan.
A bubble, quarantine. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. And then they can come on the island.
But man, you talk about like maybe a 2-week party. That would be a party.
That would be fun.
All right, buddy. We continue to have some great support through Patreon. Let's get some shout outs.
All right.
We had Crystal Grossi.
Hey, Crystal.
Jumped out at our highest level. Bellatrix.
Well, thank you, Bellatrix.
Mark Martin.
What's going on, MM?
Grace Ross.
Thank you, Grace.
Autumn White.
Hey, Autumn.
Alex Feeney.
Thank you, Feeney.
Hilder Goodman's daughter.
Well, thank you, Hilder.
Alberto Reyes.
What's going on, Alberto?
Sawyer Chefs.
Hey, Sawyer.
Special K.
Love me some Special K.
That's like the worst cereal ever made.
Yeah, that could be taken many different ways, I guess, after I said that. Love me some Special K.
Yeah, it is. Because I think that's a street name for a drug as well.
Yeah.
That's why I clarified that that's the worst cereal ever made.
There you go.
Emma Gutierrez.
Hey, Emma.
Cassie White.
What's going on, Cassie?
Sammy Ramsey.
Hey, Samazy. Yeah, it just kind of blended right there.
That's good.
Yeah.
Kimberly Shea.
Hey, Kimberly.
Paige Wayner.
What's going on, Wayner?
Andrew Bonham.
Hey, thank you, Bonham.
Rachel Bickley.
Hey, Rachel.
Nicole jumped out at our highest level.
Oh, that's awesome, Nicole.
We also had Leanne Brown jump out at our highest level.
Well, thank you, Leanne.
Dana B.
What's going on, Dana?
Nora Summers.
Thank you, Nora.
And Cheryl Montour. So thank you all for the new support. And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs.
All right.
This week we selected Kate.
Good old Kate.
Good old Kate.
Yeah.
You had to put the old in front of it, but
well,
yeah.
I mean, like, old.
Ol.
Yeah.
O-L-E.
Yeah.
So we appreciate the long-term support as well. We had some PayPal donations. We had a big one from Beer Dimple.
Really?
And he wanted to give a big donation because he wanted to say he loves men, and that's M-I-N.
Okay.
And wanted to give her a belated happy birthday shout out.
Well, that's amazing.
Yep. We had Amy Newman.
Okay.
Brandy Hay.
Thanks, Amy.
And Samantha Loves John.
And thanks, Brandy, and thanks, Samantha.
Sorry. was I going too fast for you there?
Maybe.
Gibbs, we had a Patreon monthly merch winner, and that was Amelia Thompson.
Really?
Mm-hmm. For July.
Enjoy that.
So congratulations to Amelia. Right now, we have an episode out on True Crime All the Time Unsolved This is really going to be one that I think TCAT listeners are going to want to jump over to.
I agree.
Especially if they don't normally like the unsolved facet, because we're covering the Bishop family murders. William Bradford Bishop is thought to have killed his family, and then he took off on the run. So is it unsolved? I guess technically, because they haven't convicted the guy.
Right.
I like the word that you used, which was more like unresolved.
Yeah.
Because they're pretty sure they know what happened. They just haven't been able to catch this guy.
So it's a good one. Make sure you check it out.
All right, buddy. Are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time?
I am.
We're actually headed down to Atlanta, Georgia, to talk about the 1988 murder of a young woman named Julie Love. The murder was perpetrated and or witnessed by a number of people, and it was an unsolved case for over a year. During that time, it was one of the most publicized missing persons cases in the area, maybe since the Atlanta child murders. It received a lot of attention. But I think the way that police learned about who killed Julie Love is interesting. The one thing I know for sure is that when the details all came out, they were very shocking. Julie Love grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. As a child, she suffered from a disease that caused the loss of one of her eyes. So she had to have a glass eye put in.
I had a buddy who had one of those.
Did he used to pop it out at parties and things like that?
He did. He actually did.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of people that will mess with them.
Yeah. He'd take it out and put it on the table, and we'd go out and drink. And
now I think, as a young child, that would be tough. I mean, it'd be tough at any age
as a kid, yes.
To have a glass eye. But as a child, you and I have talked about it. Kids are cruel. They make fun of people. You're telling me that back during this time frame, because this is like when you and I grew up,
right?
Type time frame. Kids were rough with
Pretty
any
brutal.
Physical type of, issue that you had. But Julie wasn't the type of person to let something like that hold her back. In high school in Birmingham, she was a cheerleader and a state gymnastics champion. Then after high school, she attended the University of Texas, where she obtained a degree in physical education.
That's impressive. University of Texas, man.
After college, Julie moved to Atlanta, where in 1985, she met a man named Mark Kaplan at a Jewish singles event. The two hit it off immediately. And I think, once the sparks started to fly, they fell in love.
That happens.
Yeah. Mark was a successful, driven person. He had worked at a Wall Street bank, and then he got into marketing, signed on with Coca-Cola.
Big employer down there.
Yeah, you're right, because that's the job that brought him back home to Atlanta, that led to him meeting Julie Love. Then in 1987, Mark and some fellow Coca-Cola executives bought the Goran's ice cream chain in Atlanta. So, he was a pretty successful guy. And years later, turned the ice cream chain into a family eatery that expanded into a number of states. But all of this brings us to 1988. Julie Love and Mark Kaplan are dating, had been for, 3 years now.
Right.
Julie was 27 years old. Mark was a few years older. There were different types of quotes from people that knew them. Most of the people said that, this was a couple that was in love with each other. There had been talk of marriage, over the time they had been together. Now, friends of Julie said that she was deeply in love with Mark and she really wanted to get married.
She couldn't wait.
Yeah, that was something that she talked to her friends about a lot. While Mark was running the ice cream chain, Julie embarked on a business of her own called the Julie Love Creative Movement for Children. So basically, she was taking her physical education degree that she had gotten from UT and was going to use it to teach kids fitness.
Yeah.
And, kind of real young kids, like preschool age kids, and try to make a business out of it.
Get those kids moving.
Got to.
Yeah.
So I think what you have, bottom line, Gibbs, a couple of good looking people in love. Both were highly motivated to make their mark on the world. Now, I think where some of the quotes differ is that, okay, yes, they were in love, but they had been together for 3 years, but it was on and off. They had separated at times,
Right.
even dated other people. And it was reportedly really over Mark's unwillingness to commit to marriage. Because like we said, I think she really wanted to marry him.
Right.
He was a little hesitant, not that he didn't love her, but
he was really driven in his career.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe he was focused on that. Maybe he just wasn't ready to get married. I don't know. But at the point that all of this takes place in 1988, they had gotten back together. And really all signs pointed to the fact that they were going to get married. Unfortunately, though, that would never happen because July 11th, 1988 would be the last time that Mark ever saw Julie. That morning, Julie left Mark's house around 8:30 a.m. as he had to head off to work, so she went to her condo. And there was some conflicting information gives, but I don't think they lived all that far apart. They lived separately,
right?
But I don't think it was that far. The other thing that was interesting is they had just returned from a weekend in Florida with Julie's family. So again, you don't spend the weekend with somebody's family unless you're
serious,
pretty serious.
Yeah.
Now it's known that Julie made several phone calls to relatives and friends that day. She later met a friend to swim laps, and then she got her nails done. At 8 p.m., she attended a career counseling meeting. This was a regular meeting that she went to, and she was wearing a peach blouse, shorts, white socks, and tennis shoes. When interviewed later, other members of the meeting said that Julie seemed very normal that night and that she left the session around 9:30. So I take from that, she wasn't nervous. It wasn't like there was some sense of impending doom.
Right. Just a regular night.
Yeah.
Doing her thing.
And these people knew her.
Right.
It wasn't like they were meeting her for the first time, so they could tell that she was acting very normally. The problem is Julie never made it home. Mark tried to call her that night, but didn't get an answer. And some of these things are verified from his messages, right? Later on, they're going to check the answering machine.
Right.
So they're going to know that Mark called at this time, at this time. He would later say that he really wasn't worried at all. That Monday night, they both had busy weeks. They had talked about it over the weekend. They really weren't planning on seeing each other, in the first part of the week. But on Tuesday, Mark bought a ring for Julie. It's a huge step.
It's big time.
Given what we just talked about.
Right.
The fact that, they've been dating for 3 years. I think Julie was kind of on him about either what or get off the pot. So buying a ring is huge. He tried to call her again that night. Still couldn't get a hold of her. Okay, probably a little more worried, right, at this point. But not in panic mode.
Right.
And I think, again, it's because they didn't live together. They probably didn't see each other every single day. They talked on the phone.
Yeah.
Most likely every day or most days.
But like you said, they had a busy schedule that week.
They did. And they had already talked about it. It was kind of pre-established that they weren't going to be spending much time with each other. I think Wednesday is when panic really started to set in. Mark still hadn't been able to reach Julie. That's when he began calling her friends. And he's hearing from her friends that they hadn't heard from her. So early Thursday morning, Mark talked to one of Julie's friends who said that she had seen Julie's car on Dover Road, but really hadn't thought much about it, right? You recognize somebody's car.
Yeah.
Well, as far as you know, there's nothing going on. Why would you feel the need to tell anybody? Now, when you find out that that person hasn't been heard from in 3 days, well, that obviously becomes a much bigger deal.
Yeah, it changes your tune at that point.
So Mark goes over, and that's when he found Julie's red Mustang convertible on the side of the road. But Gibbs, this was just really about 1.5 miles from his house.
Pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty close to his house. And there were descriptions of how the car was parked. It wasn't like a parking job that most people would do. It was almost as if the car stopped, and wherever it stopped, right? It wasn't parallel with the street.
Right.
I think the back end was more towards the curb. The front end was a little more out in the street. It's just not how most people would park a car.
More like somebody coasted in.
Maybe. And that's going to lead to, some of the police's theory on what happened. Mark called police and he met an officer at Julie's condo. Eventually they got inside, but they didn't find any signs of a struggle. They found Mark's messages on the answering machine, but nothing else suspicious. It didn't look like anything had been taken from the condo. So I think right away, you're most likely ruling out robbery.
Right.
And a home abduction from that home, the condo. But no doubt, Julie Love was missing. And the investigation began that day. It was really Mark who spearheaded the search from the kind of friends and family side, right? You got the law enforcement side, they're going to do their thing.
Sure.
But you as a concerned loved one, and we see this in a lot of cases, most people want to do whatever they can do to help. Well, Mark was able to kind of organize that. And he called a bunch of friends. He called a bunch of family. He's the one that made all the calls, got everyone together.
They were pretty busy.
Oh, man. Early on, it said that they handed out over 100,000 flyers, put up over 30,000 posters. Just think of the work that goes into that. Now, I did read somewhere that a local, I don't know if it was a printer or something, donated the supplies and the work.
Yeah.
Which was nice. The community really came out in support. They held some rallies. Julie's father posted a $20,000 reward for information leading to, solving his daughter's disappearance.
Definitely helpful.
Yeah. Like I said, this was a highly publicized case. Gibbs, in the research, I found articles that ran in newspapers all across the country, right? So this happened in Atlanta. There were articles in San Francisco papers. There were articles in papers in the Northeast, in the Northwest, and this was pretty early on. And I think one of the reasons why is because the family was really driving this.
Yeah.
They spent their own money to take out an ad in the USA Today.
Which is, well, back then for sure. I don't look at a lot of media today at the newsstands, but I know that was a huge newspaper back in the day.
It had a big circulation.
Yeah.
Now what newspaper has a big circulation? I don't know, because everything's online.
Exactly.
And a number of tips did come into police, in the early days. They were definitely under a great deal of pressure to find Julie, right? When newspapers are writing daily stories about this missing woman, you're going to get a lot of pressure from the mayor down to the police chief, down, just right down the line. Hey, we got to solve this case.
Sure. Yeah. Community's outraged. Let's get something going here.
When it's in the media, then it hits the community. Then you start to get the editorials saying, why aren't the police finding, this woman? It's just the way it happens. The other thing that came in was a bunch of sightings. I mean, people called in to say that they saw her in California, up and down the West Coast, even up into Canada.
Really?
So according to some of the reports I read, police checked into this. Now, I'm not saying they flew to California, but
right.
They had to chase down all these leads. I mean, they had psychics calling in, as I think you do in a lot of cases. Saying, okay, here's where you'll find her. Well, they got to check that out, even if they don't believe it.
Well, I definitely think there's a lot of people who have doppelgangers out there. I think we all have a doppelganger or two or three.
That, or, I think a lot of times, if you're driving in a car and you look over real quick, you see somebody, and then later on, let's say that night, you see this woman's picture on the news and you think, no, that was her.
Yeah, I saw her today.
When in reality, it wasn't at all, but your mind kind of works that way. You know, I've said it before, your mind's not a video recorder. It doesn't work like that.
And I tried to explain that to you one time when we used to work together.
Uh-huh.
Because you'd be like, I know I saw you come in and take my donut off my table. And I'd be like, I was never in your office. I never took your donut.
My big thing was why you couldn't fill out your TPS reports correctly.
I still have that problem. I still have that problem.
So inside Julie's car, they didn't find much. Her purse was missing. They monitored her cards, no activity. So that never looks good. Police learned that Julie had a history of running out of gas. And I guess, Gibbs, it happened quite a bit. You know, this came from friends, family. There was one report where police came out and said that year alone, she'd run out of gas 6 times.
That's great. That is quite a bit. Wow.
I've never run out of gas in my entire life.
I've ran out of gas twice in my lifetime.
Have you?
Yeah.
I almost ran out of gas in the Smoky Mountains, and my wife literally was crying.
Yeah.
I coasted down the last hill.
Awesome.
Going down into the valley.
Yeah.
And had enough to just, on fumes,
Yeah.
get off the exit into the gas station.
And you're like, see, I told you, there's no problem. I don't know why you got so upset.
Kramer can do it. I can do it.
Exactly.
But 6 times is a lot.
That is a lot.
And even Mark would come out to papers and say, yeah, she had a habit of testing it.
Yeah.
Right? If you want to call it the Kramer test or whatever.
We all have done it.
I've done it more than most. It's just happened to work out for me. Now, one time my luck's going to run out and I'm going to run out of gas.
I know I left here a couple weeks ago saying, hey, man, stay by your phone because I forgot to get gas. And I don't know if I got enough to make it to the gas station up the road.
Yep. And I turned my phone off immediately and went to bed.
Of course you did.
But Gibbs, I think based on this, police put together a pretty easy theory, which was that Julie ran out of gas on her way back home from the career counseling session. She set out on foot either to get to Mark's house or get to the gas station, and something happened to her. Because I mentioned it, right? The car was found about 1.5 miles from Mark's house. It was also only about 2 miles from a gas station. Well, Julie was 27 years old.
Right.
She ran, she swam, she was in really good shape.
Yeah, she was fit.
Everybody said that she could have easily jogged 1.5 miles or 2 miles to get to wherever she needed to get to.
Right.
But obviously she didn't. So police are thinking foul play, right? Somebody snatched her, somebody did something to her. Change is always a constant, but these days it feels like there's something new to grapple with every day. We may be adjusting to this new normal, but it's still stressful, and it's important to talk about it and seek support. Talkspace Online Therapy is here to give you that support because we all need it right now. Match with a licensed therapist from the comfort of your device and reach out 24/7 whenever something's on your mind. You'll hear back daily, 5 days a week. Talkspace is a fraction of the cost of in-person therapy, but with Talkspace, you can send unlimited messages to your therapist and they'll engage with you at least 5 days a week. That means you'll never have to wait to share what's on your mind. Talkspace is secure and private, using the latest encryption technology to store client information. Talkspace therapists have experience treating depression, anxiety, substance abuse, trauma, relationship issues, food and eating, and much more. The bottom line is that we all need someone to talk to, and Talkspace wants to give the licensed support we deserve at a price we can afford. As a listener of this podcast, you can get $100 off your first month on Talkspace. To match with your perfect therapist, go to Talkspace.com or download the app. Make sure to use the code TCAT to get $100 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's TCATT and Talkspace.com. Don't let allergy season slow you down. Get common allergy meds for as little as $15 with GoodRx. So you and your family, pets included, can stop allergy symptoms before they start. GoodRx is free and easy to use. Just search for your prescription on the website or the app, compare prices, and get a free coupon to show your pharmacist. Save at over 70,000 local pharmacies nationwide, including Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Publix, Kroger, and many more. Check GoodRx before every trip to the pharmacy to save up to 80% on both brand and generic medications. And did you know GoodRx rewards you for saving money too? Join GoodRx Rewards today and earn points every time you use a coupon. Remember, GoodRx is not insurance, but works whether you have insurance or not. And it could be your insurance copay price. I've been using GoodRx for years, and I can't tell you how many times I have saved money even with my insurance. Stop allergies before they start and save big on allergy medications this season with GoodRx. Go to goodrx.com/TCAT. That's goodrx.com/TCATT. Police did a lot of searching for Julie in a lot of different areas, but they had no luck. I really think they put a lot of manpower into finding Julie Love, probably based on the pressure that I talked about.
Sure.
That was coming from the community upwards and then downwards from, the hierarchy. Now, I'm sure they looked into Mark Kaplan, right, as the boyfriend. You always have to do that. But it was also reported that police interviewed at least 3 other men that Julie had recently been seeing. And I think that's where the whole on and off again relationship came. Right? They saw other people during these time periods where they were taking a break, if you want to call it that. But a year went by, no results. Now, the other thing I will say about this case is I found a ton of editorials debating the differences in how the disappearances of white women and black women were handled, right? So these were in the Atlanta papers, the Atlanta area. Race comes up a lot when you talk about this case, not just in this part. It's going to come up later on as we'll find out. But then in August of 1989, 13 months after Julie disappeared, the case broke open. So really for 13 months, police had nothing. And it broke open, Gibbs, in a very strange way. 24-year-old Emmanuel Hammond worked as an auto repairman, and he was dating a 34-year-old adult entertainer named Janice Weldon. Apparently, the two of them got into an altercation. I'm pretty sure they lived together, in which Hammond assaulted and tried to strangle Janice. Right. It's not good, right? Domestic violence, not good. We don't like it.
Nope.
Let's get rid of it. She had him arrested, and she had every right to do so.
Right.
But she also told police that he was involved in the disappearance and murder of Julie Love. And not only did Janice Weldon name Hammond in Julie's murder, but she also named his cousin, Maurice Porter, who was 18 at the time of the murder, as his accomplice. So the question is, how did Janice Weldon know this? And the answer is because she was with those two guys that night and was a witness to a large part of what happened. So based on that, police brought in Maurice Porter. He confessed. He was arrested, told his story to police. That obviously implicated Emmanuel Hammond,
right?
Or corroborated
exactly
what Janice had already said. So most of what happened that night comes from court documents and court testimony. The three of them were driving around the night of July 11th, 1988 in Emmanuel's car when they drove by Julie Love, who was walking after her car had run out of gas. So police were right about that. They offered Julie a ride, but she declined, saying that she lived close by. So Emmanuel drove off, but he turned back around and once again drove up to Julie. She said, "No, I'm good. I don't need anything." But this time Hammond got out of his car with a sawed-off shotgun.
He wasn't going to take no for an answer.
No, he wasn't. And I think, according to Porter, he had already made up his mind. As soon as he left and turned around, he'd made up his mind that he was going to get Julie. Now, he didn't know who she was, but so using the sawed-off shotgun, he forced Julie into the car. Hammond took off and drove to Grove Park Elementary, which weirdly he had attended as a youngster. So he went to his old elementary school.
Right, where he learned nothing.
Yeah, I don't know that he learned a lot there, but it was there at that location where they searched Julie's purse. They found her ATM card, and this is what they were after. Hammond forced Julie to give up her pen, and then he instructed Porter and Weldon to drive to the ATM with Julie's card and pen and get some money, get whatever money you can. The problem is they came back empty-handed because apparently Julie was so shaken, which anybody would be in that situation,
Right.
that she had given the wrong PIN number. And when they tried to punch it in, the ATM ate it.
Oh, yeah.
Or kept it. They used to happen sometimes. Weldon later testified that she told Porter on the way back, quote, "Demon going to be mad." Because that was Emmanuel's nickname, Demon.
Oh, well, she hung out with him, didn't she?
Which usually means you're a nice guy.
Yeah.
Because I always like to go by devil or demon or Gargamel or whatever
Gargamel.
whatever some of those other names are. That's from the Smurfs.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
I think so.
The problem, Gibbs, is that Janice Weldon was right. Emmanuel Hammond was so angry that he struck Julie in the face with the shotgun, and then Maurice Porter raped her. And Julie had to have known, right? She was in big trouble. She was trying to save her life, so she told the group that she had other cards at home. If they could just get those cards or that card, okay, I can get you some money.
Right. Yeah.
That's what she's telling them. So they drove to her condo, but they decided against going in because there was a security guard. Now, according to Janice, and I think this was backed up by Maurice Porter, at this point, Janice said, "Hey, I don't want this.
I'm out of this, man.
Drop me off at home." But now she had already witnessed some pretty horrific things.
Right.
But she's like, "I don't know what's going to come later, but I don't want any part of it." This is, if you believe, the version of events that have been told by some of the parties.
Exactly.
And I think you always have to take that into account. So they dropped her off, and then Hammond drove with Porter and Julie back to the Grove Park School. They got out. Hammond got some coat hangers that he had in his trunk, and they used these wire hangers to bound Julie's hands and feet. Then he wrapped a coat hanger around her neck. And the way it was described, and it's so horrific to even picture it in your head, was that Porter was holding one end of the hanger. Hammond is holding the opposite end, and they're pulling.
Yeah.
Trying to strangle Julie. And these are two grown men.
Right.
But Julie fought hard. She was not about to let these men strangle her. And I haven't mentioned it yet, but the description of Julie that was given by family members and police is that she was about 5 feet tall and weighed all of 100 pounds.
About describing your wife there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not even. My wife's 5'2".
Yeah. So even smaller.
So when you're that size, you got to fight really hard. But how much fighting can you really do when you have a sawed-off shotgun on you? There's only so much. The men got Julie back in the car, and they drove to a wooded area. This is when Hammond pulled her out of the car, walked her into the woods, and shot her. And according to Porter's account, he heard the shot. He was in the car. He heard the shot, and then he said that Hammond returned to the vehicle with blood on him. Now, Janice Weldon would later say that Hammond returned home around 7 that morning. When she asked him what happened, Hammond said that Julie put her hands in front of her face and he fired, and it blew the side of her face off. And then he dumped her body in a trash pile and covered it up with a board. As the family of Julie Love, Gibbs, those details are going to be very tough.
Oh.
All of these details, when they come out at trial, that's really rough. And we won't talk about it at trial, but I know there were a lot of parts of the trial that they just couldn't watch. They had to leave. And I think that happens a lot.
Yeah, I think so too.
with the families of victims. When you get into some of the really graphic testimony, the pictures, the evidence, are you going to be able to sit there and watch it and hear it, knowing that happened to your daughter, your sister? It's going to be rough.
I don't know if I could sit in there and listen to that.
So Emmanuel Hammond was charged with 4 counts, including the murder of Julie Love. And then it later came out that while he was in jail, he put out a contract on Janice Weldon with another inmate who was about ready to get out of jail. I guess he offered this guy a car. He offered him $20,000 if he would kill Janice Weldon.
He didn't want any witnesses out there, did he?
Well, he definitely didn't want Janice out there. You know, he knew that she was kind of the catalyst that had started this whole thing. And I'm sure he knew that she was most likely going to testify against him. I mean, let's face it, Gibbs, he did beat her and try to strangle her.
He did.
I'm sure she had a lot of animosity towards him at that point. I mean, she'd already turned him in.
Right.
Chances are he must have been thinking, she's going to testify against me.
Yeah.
And I can't have that.
Got to do what I got to do is what he was thinking, I guess.
It was early on Thursday, August 24th, that about 100 officers began the search for Julie's body in a wooded area in northwest Atlanta. And this was all based on information provided by Janice Weldon. And I know there were some people that were upset that it took police as long as it did to start searching for her body. I think they had the information from Janice for a couple of weeks, give or take.
Right.
But apparently there was some mix up between the departments. And so the information wasn't passed on. And I know that the media made and the public made a big deal about that.
It was a big deal, you know, if that was my daughter and they knew where she was and they haven't made any effort to go get her, I'd be extremely upset.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people were, including the family. So they're at this site. You know, it's known as kind of an illegal dumping ground. But Julie's father was there at the site along with the media, just waiting to see what the police found. Can you imagine that, Gibbs? You as a father, you're standing around basically a dump site, knowing that police are searching for your daughter.
Yeah.
And if they find her, it's not going to be good.
No. But I'd want to be there.
And I would too.
You know?
I would too. And it would probably be the hardest thing that, you know, one of the hardest things that you ever had to go through.
Right.
But I would be there too, because I want to know what's going on. And it was just later that afternoon that authorities found some skeletal remains that they believed to be Julie. And it took the medical examiner just a couple of hours to confirm through dental records that it was in fact the remains of Julie Love. So again, as a family, obviously you want to know what happened. You're not hoping for this outcome, but I think after 13 months, most people, I know the authorities, because they came out and said that they believed she was most likely dead. We mentioned it, no activity on her cards. And most people said there was no reason for Julie to run away, especially after what had been going on with Mark in the last, little bit. It was like they were talking marriage. That's what she wanted.
Right.
She had no reason to run off. And where's she going to go without her car and not using her cards and stuff? Now, I mentioned that race played a big role in this case. There's a debate on whether it did in the murder. I mean, I think Emmanuel Hammond was looking for drug money. He saw Julie Love as an easy target. Now, Janice Weldon would later say that Emmanuel said he was out looking for white women because he felt as though they would have bigger bank accounts. But that's according to her. But regardless, the fact that Emmanuel, Maurice, and Janice were black and Julie was white sparked some hate by white supremacist groups. A civil rights attorney named Robert Robinson was killed in December 1989 when he opened up a package with a bomb inside it. That same month, a Birmingham, Alabama judge named Robert Vance opened up a package at his home and it exploded, killing him and severely injuring his wife. And then later on in that month, an Atlanta television station received a letter claiming to be from a white supremacist group. They took responsibility for the killings and said that they were, in part, revenge for the murder of Julie Love.
Wow. So a group has taken this on themselves to seek some type of revenge.
The letter read, Julie Love, an innocent white lady, was robbed, kidnapped, raped, sodomized, murdered, and dismembered by a group of black males, and her remains were concealed for an extremely long period of time, leaving her loved ones in excruciating anguish. So besides the outright racism, which you've got a bunch of it in there, I mean, have you heard of a run-on sentence? Because that's a very long sentence.
It is and I know run-on sentences.
You do. Then a group calling itself the Aryan Resistance Movement mailed some death threats to the judge and defense attorney directly tied to Julie's case. The other two guys that were killed, they weren't involved in her case at all. It was as though I think these people were saying, hey, judicial system, you're letting this happen. We're going to take it out on you.
Right.
But here's the fascinating part. Gibbs, years later, a man named Walter Leroy Moody Jr. was convicted of the bombings. So it turned out that he mailed 4 bombs out during that month of December. 2 were intercepted, I guess, by scanners that picked up, something that didn't look right.
Right.
And he was trying to make it look like it was all the work of a white supremacist group. In fact, he was just a guy who had gone to law school, but was barred from practicing law due to a 1972 pipe bomb possession conviction that he tried to get overturned and couldn't. He was just mad at the legal system. He didn't care about Julie Love's murder. He didn't care about black on white crime. That was just all a smokescreen to do what he wanted to do.
Right. He was just stirring the pot.
Moody was executed in 2018, and at the time, he was the oldest inmate to be executed since the death penalty was reinstated. He was 83 years old. Now, the death threats from this Aryan resistance movement, I think that was real. That was real racism. The bombings, he just used racism, I think, as a cover.
Right.
Janice Weldon was given immunity in exchange for testifying against Emmanuel Hammond. Maurice Porter confessed and pleaded guilty to felony murder, armed robbery, and rape charges, but his sentencing was delayed. It wasn't going to take place until after the trial of Hammond, and for a very good reason.
Well, of course. And that's because they wanted him as a star witness.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only would they have Maurice Porter, but they would have Janice Weldon. So those are going to be the 2 star witnesses for the prosecution.
Right.
But if you go ahead and sentence Maurice Porter, then where's your leverage? Right? Because the leverage has got to be, yeah, we know you've confessed, but help us out and maybe you'll get a lighter sentence.
Right.
We won't go after the death penalty. The trial of Emmanuel Hammond began in February of 1990. And the prosecution laid out a pretty simple theory to the jury. Hammond wanted to get money to buy drugs. And as soon as he saw Julie Love that night, he made the decision that he was going to get it from her. He murdered Julie and put her body in an illegal dump because he knew that she could identify him.
Yeah.
And I think even Janice and Maurice said this, that they had used some of their names while Julie was in the car. I think that was a factor.
Right.
Obviously, I don't think they were wearing masks or anything like that. So she would have gotten a good look at their faces. And I think she knew some of their names.
Now, Janice Weldon would testify too, but we've already covered everything she said.
Yeah, I don't think there's a big reason to go into her testimony as much because really everything we laid out,
Right.
the details of the crime and all of that came from her. Now, she testified to all of that, but there's no reason to rehash it. Maurice Porter testified that he had known Emmanuel all his life, but he had never seen a dark side in him like he saw that night. And he too gave all the horrible details to the jury about what happened. And he told them later on, Hammond said to him, quote, "You should have seen how I did it, execution style."
You know, once the temps start rising, I realized I was back in the same worn out rotation. Same tank, same shorts, same everything. So I gave my daily uniform an upgrade with Quince. Their pieces are easy, elevated, and somehow make me feel more put together without even trying. Like they're 100% European linen shorts and dresses from $30. Luxe swimwear, Italian leather platform sandals, and so much more. The best part, everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middleman, Quince gives you luxury without the markup. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. I'm getting ready to stock up on shorts for summer from Quince, and I know they're going to be amazing because everything I've ordered has been of the highest quality, and the prices are amazing. Treat your closet to a little summer glow up with Quince. Go to quince.com/TCAT for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/TCATT to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/TCAT. You know, my wife and I do a lot of shopping online, and we always use Rakuten. Rakuten is the smartest way to save money when you shop because you earn cash back at over 3,500 stores. We're talking fashion, beauty, electronics, home essentials, travel, dining, concert tickets, and more. Your favorite stores like Macy's, Nike, Sephora, Dyson, and Lowe's. And that's just to name a few. Pay Rakuten to send them shoppers. And Rakuten then passes on a part of that payment to its members as cashback. Cashback is deposited directly into your PayPal account, or Rakuten can send you a check. You can even maximize your savings by stacking cash back on top of other deals, like store sales and coupons. You're already shopping at your favorite stores. Why not save while you're doing it? It really is a no-brainer. Membership is free, and it's easy to sign up. Get the Rakuten app now and join the 17 million members who are already saving. Cashback rates change daily. See Rakuten.com for details. That's RAKUTEN. Your cash back really adds up. One thing I found very interesting, Gibbs, was that the prosecution brought in a mannequin, and they had Maurice Porter, and you see this in some trials.
Right.
Every now and then, they had Maurice Porter get down on the floor and using this mannequin and some coat hangers, show the jury exactly how they bound Julie Love, how they tried to strangle Julie.
Right. It just frustrates me to hear him talk about how bad Emmanuel was and his dark side. But, you know, Maurice was just as bad. I mean, he participated. He raped her.
Yeah. And he's already confessed.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about his sentencing here in a little bit. I agree with you, Gibbs, from the standpoint that he went along with everything. Now, you can make the argument that he didn't kill her. You know, it was Emmanuel who marched her out in the woods and shot her in the face with a shotgun, killing her.
But he attempted to kill her.
Yeah, he did. He tried to strangle her. He raped her for sure, and he admitted to all that. What he did was horrible, and he's going to pay the price for that. But before he does, he's got to help convict his cousin. Both Janice Weldon and Maurice Porter testified that Hammond threatened to kill them both if they breathed the word of what happened that night. Hammond's cellmate took the stand to tell the jury that Hammond offered him $20,000 and a car to kill Janice Weldon when he was released from jail. And the prosecution had an expert come on to talk about the shotgun blast. And they described it as shattering Julie Love's skull into 22 pieces.
Yeah. Well, it was a sawed-off shotgun.
At close range.
Yeah.
But let that sink in for a minute. 22 pieces of skull. And then what does that mean to the jury? What's the jury thinking when they hear that? This guy's already a monster.
Yeah. The brutality of this.
I think it's just helping it sink in
Yeah.
even further. You know, as a man, how do you stand in front of a 5-foot, 100-pound woman or any woman for that matter, point a shotgun and shoot somebody in the face and the head? How do you do that? What kind of monster is capable of doing that?
I don't know how a man does any of the things that happened to her that night. You know, it's just horrendous. And both of those guys.
Well, I think you do it if you don't care about anything. You don't care about other people. You know, it's like this guy wasn't a serial killer per se, but, you know, in talking about serial killers.
Yeah.
How do they do it? You know, they don't view other people the way that we do, right? Most of us are empathetic to how others feel, and that's why we treat others with respect.
Right.
These killers, they don't give a you-know-what. And that's how they're able to stand in front of somebody, pull the trigger, walk back to the car and go home.
Yeah.
And fall asleep probably.
At the end of the day, it was all over. If they could have got the money out of the ATM, what? Most ATMs cap off at $500 a day. Some $300 a day.
Yeah, $300 to $500.
Yeah. So.
But when you want to score drugs,
Yeah.
that's what you need, right? $300, $400, $500.
Yeah.
That gets your fix for some period of time. But to think that you're going to take somebody's life,
Yeah.
I think that's where most people have a hard time, you know, wrapping their minds around how people could do this. I get it. You know, if you're addicted to drugs, people steal, they'll do a lot of things to try to get that money.
Yeah, they will.
The prosecution entered into evidence the shotgun that they believed was used to kill Julie Love, but they couldn't prove it forensically, right? Proving that a specific shotgun killed somebody much harder than proving that a handgun or, you know, even a rifle fired the shot that killed someone. It has a lot to do with the way that shotgun barrels are and the fact that, you know, the shells that are in the shotgun thing,
Right.
they never actually even touch the barrel. There's a plastic wad in there.
Yeah.
And so you just don't, ballistically, you just don't have that type of stuff that you would have with. Now, if you have the shotgun, the empty shell,
Right.
that's like having a casing. And I think you can do something with that, but you can't pull a bunch of buckshot out of a victim and then match it back to a shotgun. I just doesn't work that way from my understanding. And you can't always do that with a bullet either. Sometimes they get so deformed. There's just not a whole lot you can do with it.
Right.
But again, another interesting part to this case because the prosecution didn't even have the shotgun when the trial began. Didn't know anything about it. Didn't know where it was. It happened to be in a police evidence room because it was seized during a drug raid on a man named Michael Dominic. And it was Dominic who came forward after the trial had already started to tell authorities that the gun they seized from his house was sold to him by Emmanuel Hammond.
Probably looking for a deal.
Well,
you know, but
probably.
helpful.
Yeah, probably. But still very helpful. The prosecution also introduced a pair of Julie's earrings that they recovered from a pawn shop. So I guess what happened was Hammond took her earrings, gave them to Janice Weldon to pawn.
Mm-hmm.
She got about $140 for these earrings. But then later on, she was able to provide that information to authorities. They were able to track them down. Now, the defense strategy was basically to put the blame on Janice Weldon and Maurice Porter, saying that they were responsible for what happened to Julie Love, not Emmanuel Hammond. the defense played a video of Janice Weldon's interview with police. And during this interview, not only did she talk about what happened with Julie Love, but she implicated Hammond in a bunch of other crimes, some of them very similar. And one was even a murder.
Right. I think she really wanted to make sure that he got put away.
Well, she had a vested interest.
She did.
Because he had already put one hit out on her. He'd already proven that he wasn't above trying to have her killed. And I'm sure if he could have, he would have killed her himself. The defense attorney pretty much came out and accused Janice Weldon on the stand. And at one point, she shouted back at this guy, "I didn't kill Julie Love. Your psycho client killed Julie Love." Now, the prosecutor came out and told papers that they thought it was very strange that the defense attorney would use this strategy, right, of showing to the jury Janice Weldon going through and talking about these other crimes that Hammond had committed.
Right.
It's almost like you're doing the prosecution's work for them.
Yeah. Let me set up how bad this guy really is. This is his girlfriend at the time saying all these bad things about him.
Right. I think their strategy was to try to show the jury that she had told a lot of different stories. Right. So which ones are you going to believe?
Right.
The problem is the police used that same evidence basically to show that Hammond had a history of these types of crimes. So I think a lot of people looked at it as though the defense was just really reinforcing what the prosecution was already trying to do. They thought it was strange because according to the prosecution, not only had Hammond kidnapped women and forced them to give up their ATM PIN codes so he could get money, he had killed at least one woman and left her body in the same area where Julie Love was found.
So he was accustomed to doing this in that specific area.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things the prosecution really wanted to get across to the jury. This wasn't a one-time thing. This guy had a history of doing things that were very, very similar to what was done to Julie Love.
You think the defense attorney would have clued in when the prosecutor was just never really objecting to anything, you know? They're just letting us run with this. Okay.
Yeah, I got no problem. If you want to use that video, go right ahead.
Go ahead.
Emmanuel Hammond did take the stand, testified in his own defense. Of course, he said he didn't commit the crimes against Julie Love. Now, when he was cross-examined, the prosecutor showed him the shotgun and got him to admit that he was familiar with it, but he denied selling it. He claimed it was actually Janice who sold it to Michael Dominic, but Dominic testified, no, it was Hammond.
Yeah.
He's the guy that sold it to me. The prosecutor in his summation called Hammond every name in the book. I mean, every horrible adjective that you can think of, he called this guy. But he also called him Demon, which I said was his nickname. And then in what sounds like a very Perry Mason-like moment.
Yeah, I really loved when he did this.
He pointed to Hammond as he told the jury, "Give the devil his due." That's what he said.
He could have took it to another level, though. Maybe played a little bit of Charlie Daniels' Devil Went Down in Georgia.
Yeah, that would have put an exclamation point on it. I don't know if the judge would have liked it.
Well,
but we're in Georgia.
That's true.
He just called this guy a demon.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, parallels there. On March 7th, 1990, the jury took 8 hours to find Hammond guilty on all charges related to the kidnapping and murder of Julie Love. And then just 2 days later, on March 9th, it took that same jury a little over 4 hours to recommend that Hammond be put to death for his crimes. And that's exactly what sentence the judge imposed. Maurice Porter later received multiple life sentences for his role in the rape and murder of Julie. And I think it goes back to your point, Gibbs. He was a bad guy. He did some really horrible things when it came to what happened to Julie. My assumption is that maybe they took the death penalty off the table in exchange for him testifying because, he got multiple life sentences. The guy's never going to get out of jail. So I don't know what else enticement there would have been other than we won't seek the death penalty.
Right.
But I never actually saw that.
Well, good. At least he got what was coming to him.
Yeah, he definitely got, a very serious sentence. Most likely he'll die in jail. Now, on appeal, the Georgia State Supreme Court said that the prosecutor made a mistake during Hammond's trial when he told the jury there is no life without parole in Georgia. So one day he will be a free man. He's talking about Hammond. Obviously, this is said in an attempt to try to get the death sentence.
Right.
The problem is, under Georgia law, you're not allowed to say this type of stuff to the jury, right? You can't hint or say that someone may not serve their full sentence in trying to sway the jury to get them to give them a heavier sentence. But the court also said this was something that Hammond's attorney should have objected to, but didn't. So you're getting into the area a little bit of ineffective assistance of counsel.
Right.
What they did was they ordered the lower court to review the case again. But in the end, Hammond didn't get a new trial. But for a while there, it was looking like it was heading that way. He was sent to death row to await his execution. And that date came in January 2011. His last meal consisted of fried chicken, French fries, corn on the cob, jalapeno peppers, mint chocolate chip ice cream, and cherry limeade.
It's a lot of food.
It's a lot of food, and I think as far as last meals go, it's not the worst I've heard of. I love me some cherry limeade. Of course, I love fried chicken, French fries. I will say it does seem like a lot of killers choose mint chocolate chip ice cream. I feel like I've heard that a number of times. What is it with mint chocolate chip and killers?
I don't know. Might be some.
If that's your
connection.
favorite, you might want to check yourself.
I do like mint chocolate chip.
I figured you would for sure.
But it wouldn't be my first choice if I was going to be executed.
On January 25th, Emmanuel Hammond was strapped to a gurney, given an injection of the lethal cocktail of drugs. He didn't have any last words. He pretty much just stared straight ahead during the 13 minutes that it took for the drugs to stop his heart. He was pronounced dead at 11:39 p.m. And of course, there were a ton of last-minute appeals. There always are in these death penalty cases. I just didn't feel like we need to go through each and every one of them. Obviously, none of them worked because he ended up being executed.
I just wish that night, if you believe what Janice said, take me home.
And Maurice, too, because I think Maurice backed up Janice.
Right.
So you really got 2 against 1.
Right. So when she said she went home, I wish she would have picked the phone up and said, hey, police, you need to get over there. Something bad's about to happen. And maybe that would have stopped the murder.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about how bad of a guy Maurice was. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Hammond was a horrible human being.
Yeah.
But definitely you can't just give Janice Weldon a pass. I mean, she was in the car. She didn't witness the murder because she was at home by that point.
Right.
But she witnessed Julie Love being beaten. She witnessed her being raped at the very least.
Yeah.
And she had to have known that things were going to probably continue to escalate.
That's the reason she wanted to go home.
And then later on, she found out that Julie Love had been murdered, and she waited 13 months.
Right.
So, I mean, you can't just give her a pass and look at her and say she's completely off the hook. Now, the prosecution had to give her immunity.
Well, sure.
In order to get the testimony they needed. But I can't sit here and look at her and say, oh, wow, she did a great thing.
Right. I mean, glad she came forward.
Yeah, because there's a chance we could be talking about this as an unsolved case.
Exactly.
If she decides not to.
So at least the family knows what happened.
Yeah.
And two really bad individuals are no longer
That's true.
out on the streets.
That's true. I just don't want to diminish her role completely because she witnessed some really horrible things and took her time bringing them to light, I guess.
You could say she only brought them to light because bad things were happening to her at that time.
Mm-hmm. And she was afraid for her life. And I think she had 4 kids.
Yeah.
She was afraid for them too. I didn't mention that.
Yeah. But again, glad she did come forward.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I don't want to glorify her, but I don't want to downplay what she did either.
Right.
But I think overall, this is just an extremely tragic story. You know, one of the things that stood out to me, Gibbs, was the dynamic between Julie and Mark. And we spent some time talking about it, right? I think Julie really wanted to marry Mark. It sounds like he was a bit hesitant over the years. They were hot and cold. They dated other people. But in the time before her death, it seems to me as though they had both made the decision that they were going to get married and be together forever.
Yeah, it was time to move forward.
He bought a ring. Julie had talked to friends about, picking out a wedding dress. And then it's like poof, in the blink of an eye, everything has changed because of the decisions of these people to do something absolutely horrible that they didn't need to do.
No, definitely not for a few $100. It's never okay, period. But for a few $100, what are you thinking?
And when you look at the acts committed by Hammond and Porter against Julie Love, extremely brutal. And I really didn't go too much into Hammond's past. We talked about, some of the things that prosecutors said he had done. He definitely had a very extensive criminal history that dated back to when he was a juvenile. I mean, I think he had been in trouble for most of his life.
I think emotionally he was pretty numb.
I think he was. To be able to do what he did, I think he had to have been. I think he was a guy that just didn't really think anything about other people, only what he wanted and how he was going to get that.
Yeah.
And whatever was in the way or whoever was in the way, that was just collateral damage. That was just part of me getting what I want. Like I said, Maurice Porter will most likely die in prison. But as far as Janice Weldon, I really couldn't find much on her. It seems as though she's done a pretty good job of staying out of the media.
Well, that's good for her.
Which you'd think you would want to do if you were in her position.
Yeah, there's nothing good that could come from her being vocal.
No, and if a paper is writing a story about you now, that means you've done something to come to their attention, and it's probably not going to be good.
Exactly.
But I just didn't find anything. But that's it for the case of the murder of Julie Love. Gibbs, we got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Yeah, let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Caitlin calling from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I just want to say that I love you guys. You guys keep me entertained. I'm a teacher, so during all my free periods, I have to make sure I slam the pause button as my kids come back into the room so they don't know what I'm listening to. But totally worth it. I absolutely love listening to you guys. You guys make me feel like I'm having a conversation with my dad, who lives like all the way across the country. So it's so nice listening to you guys. You guys remind me a lot of him. Anyway, I would love to hear you guys cover a case that's sort of local to me, but it's actually more local to some of my family that I have in Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is about 2 hours from Houston. It's the case of Heidi Broussard. I'm sure you guys saw about it when it was on the news. It's a pretty crazy one. I don't really want to spoil too much, but she was murdered by her friend Megan Firamusa for some very disturbing reasons. So I would love to hear you guys' take on that case. She spent most of her life where my boyfriend grew up, so I would just love to hear you guys talk about it. But honestly, I would love to hear you guys talk about just about anything. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good one and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
I just couldn't hear her Louisiana accent. I wasn't really sure she was from Louisiana.
Yeah, it wasn't strong. But, depending on where you're from in Louisiana, top to bottom, it's a long way.
It really is.
So if you're in the northern part, it's not as strong. You get down to New Orleans.
Yeah, get down to the heel of the boot.
I thought you were going to say voodoo.
Yeah,
and you were trying to say voodoo.
Voodoo.
But we appreciate the voicemail.
We do. Thank you.
Hi, guys. This is Jamila speaking. I just want to say that I really love your podcast, and I know you hear this a lot, but it's truly amazing. I love the kind of detail you put into not only the victims and the murders, but also into the entire trial. That's really great. I am actually from Denmark, but I currently live in China. And I was just thinking, I would like to hear if you maybe one day could do some true crime involving something that happened in China, or at least a connection between China and the States. That would be really awesome. I would truly love that. But yeah, I really, really love your podcast. Keep on doing your awesome. Have a good one, guys, and thank you.
We could.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt we need to get over to some other countries. I've been wanting to get to China. Russia has some really interesting cases. The problem is every time I look into them and I start to look at the pronunciations of things,
right?
Like, we can't even pronounce the cities in our own country, and we're supposed to figure this out. And
it's just, it has a whole lot of different obstacles.
There are some other obstacles, no doubt about it, but we're going to get there. We've got to. Russia for sure has got, 2 or 3 really monstrous cases that we need to cover, and people send them in all the time. And I'm sure everyone listening knows what they are, but
we do have that one case we're going to do in Kazakhstan. Follows that Borat guy.
Yeah. Borat, the serial killer.
Yeah.
Yeah. People will like that one.
Yeah. It's a good one.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Alicia down in South Georgia. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I've been listening to it as much as possible when my kids aren't around. I did have an interesting case for you that happened near my hometown. His name was Billy Daniel Rollerson Jr. He was convicted in the Memorial Day slaying in 1993 of 3 people. And it's an interesting case to me because there's a little bit of necrophilia involved, which I'll never understand, but it's there. Anyway, thank you so much for all your hard work. And as always, keep your own time ticking.
Yeah, I don't think I'm familiar with that one. I'm going to have to write that one down. I mean, the guy's name's Billy Daniel, so
yeah,
that's interesting there.
But she liked this case being in Georgia.
Oh yeah. Sure. I doubt she liked it.
Well, not liked it, but
like the episode. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Nobody likes what happened.
No.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Max from Atlanta. Haven't called in a while, but still listening. Just haven't had a chance to call. Mike, so glad to hear your daughter's is feeling better and everything's going well. Just listen to the Polk case. I think Susan Polk. I really, out of all your cases you've done, that's about the least sympathy I have for a victim. I mean, at the best case, it was a statutory rape, and he took the trust the parents had, and the girl, basically, the child had in him, and basically abused her. Like you said, at the end of the episode, she was probably mentally ill from the jump, and he never did anything for her. Tragic case. Keep your own time ticking and continue good health, fellas. Take care. Bye.
I haven't heard from Max in a while. I'm glad he reached out.
Yeah, he always has good insight. And I would say he's spot on with what most people are saying about that Susan Polk case.
Right.
It's very rare that the person that is killed is seen as, like kind of very unsympathetic because of what they did.
Yeah.
In the past. But I didn't even realize it, but Max from Atlanta too. So
oh yeah, that's right.
It's not like I'm screening these and placing them in because we're doing a case in Atlanta. It just turned out that way.
Yeah.
But we appreciate the voicemails. Gibbs, we had a couple things in the mailbag.
Yeah.
Francesco Gentinetti sent in a Harley chip from Vacaville.
Really? Got it from Vacaville?
Yeah, where Big Ed Kemper is housed.
Yeah. How about that?
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then Yvette Casey sent us basically a COVID-19 care package.
I seen.
From Australia.
Yeah.
There's Tim Tams, which I know my daughters will eat. They love those.
Right.
There's all kinds of snacks, most of them made with Vegemite.
Yeah.
There's also Vegemite.
I know how you feel about Vegemite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
I was kind of thinking that I should go on a all Vegemite diet.
Yeah.
What better way to lose weight than to say to yourself, the only thing you can eat is Vegemite?
And at that point, you would lose the weight you want to lose?
Yeah.
But did you know if you take the Vegemite and rub it on your scalp, Hair will grow.
It's not a chia
Try it.
plant.
I bet you try it after I leave. You'd be like, you know what? What if he was correct?
Oh, there was also some emergency TP in there, which I found pretty funny.
Well, that's important. Never know.
So we appreciate all of that. All right, buddy, that's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
In the early hours of December 4th, 2024, CEO Brian Thompson stepped out onto the streets of Midtown Manhattan.
This assailant pulls out a weapon and starts firing at him.
We're talking about the CEO of the biggest private health insurance corporation in the world.
And the suspect,
he has been identified as Luigi Nicholas Mangione,
became one of the most divisive figures in modern criminal history.
It was targeted, premeditated, and meant to sow terror.
I'm Jesse Weber, host of Luigi, produced by Law and Crime and Twist. This is more than a true crime investigation. We explore a uniquely American moment that could change the country forever.
He's awoken the people to a true issue.
Finally, maybe this would lead rich and powerful people to acknowledge the barbaric nature of our healthcare system.
Listen to Law and Crime's Luigi exclusively on Wondery Plus. You can join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.